Hey Predators, Travis here. To sum this whole video up in about 10 seconds or so, the main differences between a flagship bow and an entry-level bow are this, really. It's going to be faster, typically going to be lighter weight, it's going to have a much better strings, less shock in the hand after the shot, and it's just going to be a lot more accurate and more durable. Does that mean that with a $3,000 bow, or in this case a $1,000 bow, versus a $300 bow, does that mean you're going to kill different animals with these two things? Not at all. I could take the same animals with this bow that I could with this one. It just really depends on how good I am at as a shot. There are some definite benefits to shooting a flagship bow, so let's get into those right now. What is up, Predators? So we are almost at 1,000 subscribers. So if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, then we're gonna hit that mark, and I'm gonna do a giveaway whenever we get to 1,000 subscribers, just to give a little something back to you guys who have gotten us to this point so far. So the big differences between these two things, between a flagship bow and an entry-level bow, typically start with the manufacturing process. A lot of videos on this topic go out there and they basically just buy two bows and they shoot them and they say, hey, well, this is the one I like better than that one. I don't think it's a very good process to do this, because you don't go into any details, or you don't go into the why. Why do these things cost that much different? It's not too much different from, buying cars as well. There's a big difference between a 1994 Toyota Camry and a 2021 Ferrari. There's just a big difference between these two things. The good news is that they do have some things that are very similar to one another, like I said earlier, where you can kill the same animals with these different bows. It's going to be a measure of efficiency, and durability and quality of parts are really going to be the main differentiators between a lower end bow and a higher end bow. There's also that whole status symbol thing, but we won't get into that. So obviously I shoot a Martin bow, so I'm not all about having the newest Matthews or Hoyt bow, which are great bows, but to each their own. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is going to be the cams. So the cams of the bow are really the main differentiator between a smooth draw cycle and a more aggressive draw cycle. Typically a more aggressive draw cycle is going to give you a lot faster bow. But if you have shoulder problems, or if you aren't able to draw a massive amount of weight, you might also want a smoother shooting bow. Typically I shoot about 70 pounds, so I can handle a little bit more aggressive cam system. But basically the makeup of the cams in most flagship bows these days is going to be made out of a machined aluminum. In fact, for that matter, a lot of cams are going to be made out of machined aluminum. The great thing about these aluminum cams is that they are very lightweight, they're very durable, and they can be machined very easily. So those three things make it to where the cam, honestly, is not going to be a huge factor in the price of the bow, but it's really going to be very deterministic of the draw cycle of the system. If you have larger cams on there, it typically ends up making you have a smoother draw cycle, and it does change several other characteristics of the bow. In some cases on cheaper bows, you will see plastic cams, or usually it's like a cheaper metal that has a plastic coating on the outside of it. They're not very common, but they do exist, and this is something you want to be careful of, because some of these plastic coated or plastic cams, especially on really cheap like kids bows and things like that, they're not very durable, and it's going to have a big effect on your shooting characteristics, and it's going to have a big effect on the durability of the bow. So plastics and polymers, they don't age very well. They are more prone to dry rotting and cracking and things like that, and warping as well. So if you have a warped cam, or if you have a cracked cam, your shots are not going to be consistent, and it's not going to be safe to shoot, even if they are just lined in like a plastic or something like that, because they use a cheaper like cast steel or something for the inside of the cam and then coat it in plastic or polymer. It still just is not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be as quality as a machined aluminum cam. Next over here are the limbs. The limbs are very important because, as we said in the first video, which I'll put a link up to here, the first one we talked about how the limbs store the energy of the draw whenever you draw the bow back. Some of the newer bows, most of the newer bows have almost a parallel limb system here, right? And the limbs, not only is it going to be a big difference in the quality of the bow as far as how durable are the limbs and how many shots can they put up with, and how much energy can they store, right? This can limbs determine are a big determining factor in your draw weight. But it's also going to make the hand shock change, right? Some people think that the hand shock is controlled through the grip, or that the grip of the bow changes, you know, or how much vibration dampening is in the bow changes, you know, how much hand shock is felt after the shot. But typically this is actually the position of the limbs. And here's an example. So this bow right here is an older, what we call a D-shaped bow right here. So you see, compared to this other bow here, the axle to axle distance isn't that great. It's about 2 or 3 inches. So this is a 33-inch axle to axle bow. This is about a 30-inch axle to axle bow. But what you can see is really big of a difference is the size of the risers. The riser is about 6 inches different here, okay? And so you see the angle on the limbs as well is pretty drastically different. So on this one, you've got more of these swept back, kind of upward pointing limbs because of that short riser. And on the Max 33 here, you see it's got a little bit more of a parallel limb system. A lot of the new bows like the Matthews V3 and the Hoyts and things like that are coming with a more parallel limb bow, where basically the limbs sit at a flatter angle and come kind of preloaded with that tension on it. But what this does is it means that whenever we release the shot, the limbs are flexed, right? So these are deflexed. Whenever I draw the bow, the limbs are going to flex down like this. Whenever I release that shot, you can see that the limbs will return back to this position here. So the shock of the limbs decompressing rapidly like that is going to go up and away from the center of the bow here. So there's not going to be much felt hand shock here. Whenever I look over here at this bow, with this very cheap bow here, you can see it's got this kind of more upward angle right here, okay? So whenever I draw the bow, this is going to come down here, and then whenever I release, it's going to kick forward more than it is going to go up. So it's not going to go just up, it's also going to go forward, which kind of gives you that feel of like the bow wants to jump out of your hand, because the limbs are physically pushing the bow forward whenever you shoot. So that's something to keep in mind. It's very important. As far as the manufacturing process on most of the limbs, it's typically going to have either no core, it's going to be layered fiberglass, or it's going to be have like a carbon core with a fiberglass layered around that. And basically what it's going to do is that some of the best limbs you can buy on the market are Gordon glass limbs, and you see these on a lot of high-end bows because they're very strict manufacturing quality. So there's like typically one company that makes all of these different limbs for these companies, and they just rebrand them for their brand. So this bow is made up out of a lot of different parts that come from various sourced manufacturers, and like I said, Gordon glass limbs are some of the best on the market. It can be a little bit more expensive as well, but you can be almost guaranteed that they're going to do a good job for you. All right, so next is going into the riser. So the riser is going to be a big differentiator as well. Just like we were talking about with the length of the riser is going to be a factor. But not only that, but the number of pieces in the riser are going to be a factor too. So first of all, this right here is a solid piece of aluminum that is machined to have this very unique shape to this bow, okay? Again, it's one solid piece of aluminum that has machined out. They basically do a subtractive or they take away parts from that billet or that solid piece of aluminum in order to carve this bow out of it. Much like you used to make a riser for a traditional bow by grabbing a branch or a limb off of a tree and shaping that into the bow that you need. With some less expensive bows, you're going to see that they have a 2 or 3 piece riser even, where they have a lower, middle, and upper part, or sometimes they'll have a lower part that comes up to about here, and then you've got an upper part as well. These bows aren't bad per se, but having more than one piece in there means that you've got to either weld or you've got to bolt these 2 pieces together, which just adds another place where you can have a little bit of torque, a little bit of inconsistency, I guess you'd say, and also something else that can break. If those bolts ever break under tension, your bow's going to have a catastrophic failure. The material that the riser's made out of makes a big difference as well. So for instance, this is a solid piece of aluminum, which whenever it's by itself, it is very, very, very lightweight, and that's why it's so commonly used in the riser of the bow. But there's also, you can buy a bow made out of a carbon or a carbon composite riser. Usually this consists of some tubes, some carbon tubes that are bent into a very specific shape to make that riser very rigid. The great thing about carbon risers is that they are very lightweight, but not only that, they are also not very good at conducting heat. They're a great insulator. So if it's 30 degrees outside and you're walking around with this bow in your hand with this solid aluminum riser, it's gonna be like a damn icicle in your hand. With that carbon bow, you're not gonna notice much of a difference. It's still gonna be cold, but thankfully that carbon fiber doesn't actually conduct heat very well or cold. So you don't have those temperature extremes. I'm sorry, it is like super hot in here. It's about 100 degrees outside and it is like raining at the same time. So it's like 100% humidity. Gotta love Texas. All right, I digress. A few other things that you might see that are missing on a lower end bow versus a high end bow. One is the type of cable guard here. This is a roller bearing cable guard that I've put on here. This didn't come from the factory like this. It was a cable slide where it was a piece of plastic that slid over a carbon rod here. That type of cable slide works just fine. The ones with the roller bearings though end up working a lot better. You'll see a lot of newer ones that have these flexible roller guards with just wheels on it, these cable wheels that kind of just hold these cables out of the way. Those work just fine too. But basically you don't want to have any chatter or any drag as these things slide across that bar. So you can see on the lower end bow here, instead of a carbon fiber rod here, this is just made out of I think it's a solid piece of aluminum, so it doesn't flex. Sometimes with a cable guide, whenever the cables draw and they pull on this, it's actually not a bad idea for this to flex because it's gonna make it less likely for your limbs to flex the wrong way or for your riser to have flex in it. This is a slide, so I can feel there's a lot of drag here. Look, I can actually move this into a position and almost get it stuck there. Whereas this is the normal position it wants to sit, I can pull it over here and it wants to get stuck because there's a lot of drag in here. So this needs to be able to move, and so this will make a little bit of the difference in the price between a low end bow and a flagship bow. Next, you'll notice, if I can show you this bow first, you'll notice there's something missing here from the other bow. So this right here is what we call a string stop. Basically, the string stop's only job is just to stop the string. One of the loudest noises that come from you shooting your bow is not vibration that just happens through the riser and through the different parts of it. Typically, it's vibration directly from the string. So if you want a quieter bow, the first thing is you got to put a string stop on there. So having a good string stop on there is going to make your bow much quieter, but also it's not a super cheap, or it's not a super expensive part, and so this is something that you should have on every bow. It's going to, like I say, make your bow so much quieter, and it's going to just keep that string from slapping back and forth after the shot. If you watch a slow motion shot of a bow, you can see even with a string silencer, there's kind of a reverberation here of the string after the shot stops, but it stops much faster with a string stop than it does without one. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is that's very important, and the rest of it, if I miss something, guys, we can talk about it in the comments below, keep the discussion going. But the next thing that is very important is going to be your strings. And so the strings that come with these Martin bows, these high-end Martin bows, are either the Thread Z or the gas bowstrings, which are both very great strings. I've had no issues with any of them. These are the Ghost XV strings, and they have a feature built into them that is, I think, one of the most important things about a string, is you want it to be rock solid. Now, it kind of sounds counterintuitive. You don't want solid strings, right? But what I mean is that you don't want a string that's going to stretch out over time. And that can happen with some bowstrings. Even with some of the high-end bowstrings that come on like your Matthews and your Hoyts, the factory bowstrings are not that great. We can do a whole video just on bowstring materials. But the important thing is you want one that does not stretch. And that means that if the bowstring stretches over time, it's gonna get looser. What you're gonna see is you're gonna see a drop in your draw weight, you're gonna see your accuracy decline, and overall, everything's gonna be less tight and less in tune with your bow. So very important to get strings that don't stretch. Again, I highly recommend, just because I've used them and I like them, not because I'm sponsored or anything by them, but the gas bowstrings. This is the Ghost XV bowstring. They're only come in white, and that's because they're not dyed with any dyes. So there's no powder or any dyes like that that come off the string that can actually cause friction in there and cause the bowstring to prematurely wear. So really great strings that are very durable. They're going to last a long time, and they're not going to just stretch out on you. Okay. Compare that to, again, the entry-level bow here. You can see I abuse my equipment very well. So these strings are made of a much cheaper material, and honestly, I can't put my finger on exactly what type of material it is, but it's very easy to stretch these. There's partially because this bow doesn't have a whole lot of draw weight, but these strings are not the best quality. They have, ever since I've had this bow, they're very temperature sensitive. So if I leave it out in the garage here, where it's 100 degrees, they're going to be a lot more flexible than if I keep it inside for a while and then bring it out to shoot. So the cheaper bowstrings are just not always a great idea. But the coolest thing is that you can remedy a cheap bowstring by just going and replacing it with a nice bowstring. Most bowstring manufacturers can make a custom bowstring to fit your bow, and so I could take this cheap $300 bow and put a $100 set of Ghost XV bowstrings on here. Maybe a little overkill, but you know, it's something I can do. So this is one of the easiest things in this list to remedy. Thanks, Predators, for tuning in. Thanks for liking and subscribing the video. Right now I've got a couple of people that are testing out the Apex Predator Outdoors nose buttons that we got on here that I'm designing. This is what I call the double anchor. It's a nose button that can also double as a kisser button if you need it as well. We have it in kind of a rigid, kind of a more sharp version, and we also have it in a softer, rounded version. So I've been a big fan of using the Bowmar Archery nose button for a while. The problem I've seen with these is, though, it's way too aggressive of a point on there, so I end up with like a little, I call it like a hickey on the tip of my nose because this thing's so aggressive. So I wanted to make something that still gives you that point of reference there, but is not nearly as aggressive. These are made out of a flexible TPU rubber, so they last a long time, put up with their abuse, and they're not going to be too aggressive on your face. So guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll put the names of the guys up here that are doing the testing. Thanks you guys for helping out, and hope to hear from you soon. If you want to be included on the list of people that I send things to test equipment as we come out and we release new equipment, go ahead and send me an email at apexpredatorod@gmail.com, and we'll see about, you know, some of you, not everybody, I can't handle all the requests, but we'll get some of you guys a you know, free set of nose buttons to try out, and I want to get your feedback. That's the biggest thing. I want to make sure that this is something that's going to work, something that people are going to like, something that you like, and then once it's done, I can finalize it and I can say, okay, this is working great. Then we'll start selling these as a product that you can buy. Biggest thing I want to do with this is I want to make it cheap and inexpensive. That way, you know, more people can try this and more people can get availability to it. So thanks you guys for watching, and as always, keep defying the odds.